Let me say something that might make you uncomfortable right out of the gate. The biggest mistake most people make during a traffic stop is not carrying something illegal. It's trying to sound cooperative. I know that sounds backwards. You've been taught your whole life that if you're polite, calm, respectful, everything will go smoothly. And yes, politeness matters. Tone matters. But cooperation, in the way most people understand it, is not the same thing as protecting yourself. In fact, the more you try to help, the easier you make it for an officer to justify searching your car. I've reviewed hundreds of body camera videos. I've sat through suppression hearings where every word from a roadside interaction was dissected frame by frame. I've watched juries react to tone, posture, hesitation, and over again, I've seen the same turning point, the same moment where the entire encounter pivots. It's almost never dramatic. No shouting, no threats, just a simple question delivered in a calm voice. "You don't mind if I take a quick look inside, do you?" And then the driver says something that sounds harmless. "I mean, I guess that's fine." Or, "Yeah, go ahead." Or even worse, "I don't have anything to hide." That's the moment it's over. So today we're talking about 5 words that can prevent a car search. 5 words that are simple, legal, and incredibly powerful. I do not consent. That's it. Not a speech, not an argument, not a lecture about constitutional law, just I do not consent. Now here's where this gets complicated. Most people don't understand how car searches actually happen in the real world. They imagine officers need warrants. They imagine probable cause must be obvious. They imagine some dramatic discovery. That's not how it works. On the roadside, consent is king. Under the Fourth Amendment, you are protected from unreasonable searches and seizures. But one of the largest exceptions to the warrant requirement is voluntary consent. If you give it, even casually, even awkwardly, even because you felt pressure, the search is almost always lawful, and courts do not require officers to tell you that you can refuse. Let that sink in. I've watched videos where an officer stands beside a driver's window at night, red and blue lights flashing, traffic roaring past, adrenaline flooding the driver's system, and the officer says, "You mind if I check your vehicle real quick?" The driver shrugs and says, "Sure." Later, in court, that shrug becomes voluntary consent. Now this is the part most people misunderstand. You do not have to prove you were pressured. The burden flips. The officer only has to show that a reasonable person would have felt free to decline. And guess what? Judges often believe that a calm tone and a conversational request equals freedom. This is the trap. The officer doesn't need to accuse you of anything. He doesn't need evidence. He just needs your permission. And human beings are wired to comply with authority, especially in high-stress situations, especially when we want the encounter to end. That's why I do not consent matters so much. It is clear. It is unambiguous. It cannot be misinterpreted as a shrug or a nervous joke. It draws a clean legal line. But let me be honest with you, saying those words will not necessarily make the officer smile and send you on your way. In fact, sometimes it does the opposite. Here's where it turns. When you refuse consent, you remove the easy path. Now the officer has to decide whether he has independent legal justification to search. Probable cause, plain smell, plain view, a canine sniff conducted within lawful time limits, or some other exception. And this is where the psychology comes in. I've watched officers pivot the moment someone refuses. The tone shifts subtly. Questions get sharper. The conversation slows down. The officer might step back and call for backup. Or he might say something like, "If you've got nothing to hide, why not just let me take a quick look?" That's not a legal argument. That's psychological pressure. Because now you're thinking, am I making this worse? Am I escalating this? Is he going to get mad? Adrenaline is a powerful thing. Your heart rate climbs, your hands shake, your mouth dries. You start second-guessing yourself. And this is exactly why the phrase has to be rehearsed. It has to be automatic, because in that moment, you will not be thinking like a law student. You will be thinking like a human being who wants the flashing lights to disappear. I do not consent. Say it calmly, not sarcastically, not defiantly, not angrily, calm, even, neutral. Body language matters more than people realize. Keep your hands visible, keep your movements slow, make eye contact briefly, but don't stare aggressively. Your goal is not to challenge authority. Your goal is to assert a right without creating additional suspicion. Now let's talk about gray areas, because real life is full of them. Sometimes an officer doesn't ask directly. He phrases it casually. You don't have any weapons in the car, right? Or, mind if I just check your trunk real quick? Or even, step out for me. That last one is important. Under Supreme Court precedent, officers can order you out of the vehicle during a lawful traffic stop. That's not a search, that's officer safety. You must comply with that command. But stepping out does not equal consenting to a search. Here's where this gets subtle. Once you're outside the vehicle, the psychological shift intensifies. You're standing on the roadside. You feel exposed. The officer might stand between you and your car. Another unit might arrive. Suddenly, the environment feels controlled. Then the question comes again. This is where most people crumble. I do not consent. It does not have to be a speech about the Constitution. It does not require you to cite case law. It simply preserves your Fourth Amendment protection. Now, there are exceptions, and you need to understand them because I am not here to sell you magic words. If an officer has probable cause, for example, the odor of marijuana in jurisdictions where that still supports probable cause, visible contraband, admissions you made, he can search without your consent. If a trained K-9 alerts during a lawful detention, that can establish probable cause. If your car is impounded, an inventory search may follow. I do not consent does not stop a lawful search based on independent grounds. What it does is prevent you from giving away your protection voluntarily. I once handled a case where a young man was pulled over for a broken taillight. Clean record, polite, respectful. The officer chatted with him about where he was coming from. The young man mentioned a friend's house. He laughed nervously. The officer asked if there was anything illegal in the vehicle. No. Then came the question. Mind if I check? The young man hesitated. That hesitation was later described in court as looking away and pausing. Then he said, sure. Inside the trunk was a backpack that didn't belong to him. It belonged to a passenger who had been dropped off earlier. Inside the backpack was contraband. In the suppression hearing, we argued the consent was not voluntary. We argued subtle coercion. We argued the late hour and flashing lights. The judge watched the body cam. The judge said the driver appeared calm and cooperative. Motion denied. Those 2 seconds, sure, changed the trajectory of his life. Now this is the part most people don't like to hear. Asserting your rights may make the stop longer. It may mean waiting for a K-9 unit. It may mean sitting there while the officer writes every detail carefully. It may mean you feel judged. Let me be honest with you. Officers are human. Some take refusal personally. Not all, but some do. And they may respond with increased scrutiny. That does not make your refusal wrong. It makes it inconvenient. There is a difference. The hard truth is that constitutional rights are not designed to make roadside interactions comfortable. They are designed to protect you from government intrusion. And protection sometimes feels awkward. Here's another nuance. If an officer begins searching anyway after you've clearly said, I do not consent, do not physically resist, do not argue endlessly, do not interfere, let it happen. Why? Because the roadside is not the courtroom. Your refusal preserves the issue. If the search turns out to lack probable cause, your attorney now has a clean argument. The body cam will show you asserting your right. That matters. Judges look for clarity. They look for whether you drew a line. Silence can be ambiguous. Shrugs can be interpreted. Nervous laughter can be framed as agreement. I do not consent is not ambiguous. This is also where people get tripped up with over-talking. They start explaining, I just know my rights. I watch a lot of videos. I've had bad experiences before. Stop. The more you talk, the more material you give. The power of the phrase is its simplicity. You are not required to justify your refusal. You are not required to explain. The Constitution does not say you may refuse if you provide a satisfactory reason. It simply protects against unreasonable searches. Now let's talk about timing, because that matters too. If the officer has already started searching and you suddenly say, I do not consent, it may be too late to undo consent already given. That's why clarity from the beginning is critical. If you previously said something ambiguous, correct it immediately. I want to be clear. I do not consent to any searches. Calm, neutral, recorded. And yes, everything is being recorded. Body camera footage has changed the landscape of suppression hearings. Judges no longer rely solely on testimony. They watch tone. They watch posture. They watch whether the officer asked in a conversational way or an authoritative command voice. And they watch you, which brings me to demeanor. Do not smirk, do not roll your eyes, do not cross your arms defensively. Keep your posture open, keep your voice steady. Nervousness is normal. Judges know that. Hostility is not helpful. The goal is not to win a roadside debate. The goal is to survive the encounter legally intact. This is where most people misunderstand the role of police psychology. Officers are trained to read cues. They look for inconsistencies, evasiveness, excessive friendliness, over-explaining. When someone refuses consent calmly, without theatrics, it often registers as confidence rather than guilt. But when someone refuses and then launches into a rant about tyranny, it escalates. You want controlled restraint. I do not consent. And then silence. Let the officer decide what to do next. Maybe he writes the ticket and sends you on your way. Maybe he calls for a K-9. Maybe he develops probable cause independently. But whatever happens next is not built on your voluntary surrender. There's something else people rarely consider. Even if you have nothing illegal in the car, consent searches can uncover misunderstandings. Prescription bottles not in their original container. A friend's property. A forgotten pocket knife in a state with strict regulations. Legal gray areas that become temporary seizures. Searches create risk. Every time. The Fourth Amendment was written by people who understood that unchecked searches erode freedom gradually, not dramatically. So when I tell you 5 words can prevent a car search, I am not promising immunity. I am telling you that those 5 words force the system to operate within its legal boundaries rather than through your cooperation. Let me say something else that may surprise you. You can be polite and refuse at the same time. Officer, I respect what you're doing, but I do not consent to any searches. Tone transforms perception. Now imagine this scenario. It's late. You're tired. You get pulled over for drifting slightly within your lane. The officer says he smells something. You know there is nothing there. He asks to search. You refuse. He calls for a K-9. You wait 20 minutes. The dog arrives and does not alert. You're released. Inconvenient? Absolutely. But contrast that with the alternative. You consent and something unexpected is found, or the search damages your vehicle, or a misunderstanding spirals. Which inconvenience would you rather have? This is not about distrusting every officer. It's about understanding that the system functions on legal thresholds. Consent lowers that threshold to 0. Now here's the deeper layer. When you rehearse, I do not consent, you're not just memorizing words. You're conditioning your nervous system, because under stress, humans default to habit. If your habit is compliance, you will comply. If your habit is clarity, you will assert calmly. Practice it out loud, in your car, in your house. Hear how it sounds. Remove the edge from your voice. Remove the apology. It is not, I'm sorry, but I guess I don't consent. It is not, I'd rather you didn't. It is not, do I have to? It is a statement, I do not consent. And then you stop talking. If they push again, I do not consent. If they rephrase the question, I do not consent. Consistency matters, because in court, consistency reads as credibility. I've seen cases won because a driver calmly repeated those words while remaining respectful. The body cam showed no probable cause, no alert, no independent basis. The search occurred anyway. Evidence suppressed. Case dismissed. Those 5 words created a record. This is where it all comes together. You cannot control whether you are stopped. You cannot control an officer's suspicions. You cannot control whether they attempt psychological pressure, but you can control whether you voluntarily waive a constitutional protection. And waivers are powerful. Once given, they are difficult to undo. So understand the tension, understand the inconvenience, understand the gray areas and exceptions. Understand that refusing consent is not a shield against lawful searches based on probable cause, but it is a barrier against unnecessary ones. The roadside is not the place for debates. It is not the place for lectures. It is not the place for ego. It is the place for calm clarity. I do not consent. Say it until it feels natural. Say it until your voice no longer trembles when you imagine flashing lights. Say it until it becomes reflex, not reaction. Because in the real world, the difference between a routine traffic stop and a criminal charge often hinges on a single moment, a single answer, A single sentence that either opens your vehicle to scrutiny or keeps the burden where it belongs. 5 words. I do not consent. Rehearse them until they are automatic.